Sports and slow motion footage seems like a match made in heaven, but how exactly does it work? Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Juan here, and as always, very excited to get to sit down with you guys today and talk about how to make sports content. If you guys are new here, if you guys are interested to see how I make my sports content, more behind the scenes, more tutorials, then make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit the like button down below. It would help me and the channel grow immensely, and it would allow me to keep making these videos and keep making more content for you guys to learn. So as I said in today's intro, we are going to be talking about slow motion footage, how to shoot it, how to edit it, how to just get that really buttery cinematic slow motion footage that you see in all professional teams' highlight reels on their Instagrams, Twitters, etc. How do you get that really cinematic slow motion that just makes your videos look epic? There's nothing like seeing a slow motion dunk in a basketball game, or even being able to slow down a soccer ball or a hockey puck in midair as the player scores a goal. But how exactly do you get this really cinematic slow motion footage? There's a variety of factors that come into play that determine how good and how smooth your slow motion footage is going to look, from the moment you turn your camera on to the moment you import and start editing your footage. So the first thing you're going to have to keep in mind when you want that slow motion footage is how you're recording it and the settings on your camera. The first thing to keep in mind is the frame rate that your camera shoots. The frame rate is essentially the number of frames that the camera is capturing per second. The standard frame rates you see all the time are 24 and 30 frames per second. That's what you see in movies, that's what you see in television, but then you get into 60, 120, and even 240 frames per second. And that's when slow motion really comes into play and you can really start playing around with the speed of your footage. So now you're probably asking yourself, Juan, I have a camera, I want to shoot slow motion footage, but what frame rate do I shoot at? The answer to that is it depends. It really depends on your equipment and the scenario you're in. Personally, for sports, I'm always trying to shoot at the highest frame rate my camera can handle. In this case, I'm shooting on the Sony a6300, and it can handle frame rates up to 120 frames per second. Most cameras nowadays can shoot between 60 to 120 frames, which both are suitable depending on the scenario. And I think, for some cameras that don't shoot 120, 60 frames per second is more than enough. But now there are some cameras that actually have the ability to shoot higher, up to 240 frames per second. If you can do that and you're in a well-lit enough environment, by all means, go crazy. That's even slower than most people can go nowadays. At the same time, I've gotten away with shooting 60 several times, simply because I wasn't in a well-lit environment and I really didn't want to crank my shutter down that much. Speaking of shutter, the next thing you have to keep in mind is the shutter speed that your camera is shooting. That's going to determine how smooth the footage looks coming out of camera and how natural the motion blur is. Shutter speed is so important to understand and get right when you're shooting in slow motion in order to really be able to get that smooth footage, whether you're slowing it down or playing it at full speed. Essentially, you want to follow what's called the 180-degree shutter rule. This means whatever frame rate you're shooting in, you want to set your shutter speed to 1 over double that number. So if you're shooting 120 frames per second, you want to set your shutter speed to 1 over 250. If you're shooting 60, you want to set it to 1 over 125. This just allows the camera to capture the most effective and the most natural motion blur, and it's kind of less jarring when you're looking at it later on. There are some cases where you might want to crank your shutter up or down. I think it just depends on your scenario and what look you're going for, but for the most part, I try to stick to that rule. So you have your camera settings ready, you shot your event in your game, you got some highlights, and you really want to cook with that slow motion footage. Let's hop into Premiere real quick, and I'm going to show you guys exactly how you can edit your slow-mo footage. All right, so after importing your footage into your computer and into Premiere or your editing software, we can now get to work onto slowing down your footage, and I'm going to show you guys my preferred techniques. There are several ways you can do this. These are just simply my ways that I choose to edit slow motion footage and process it within my editing software, but there are a ton of other ways you can find on YouTube and other websites. This is just my technique. This is just what fits my workflow. So let's get into it and I'll show you guys exactly how I slow down my footage. First things first, when you're in Premiere Pro, you want to create the sequence with the correct frames per second if you want to get that cinematic look. So inside Premiere Pro, we're going to go to sequence and we have some presets here, but I'm just going to show you what you would normally use if you didn't have any presets. I usually go to digital SLR, 1080p, and you want to select this one with P24. So essentially this sequence has 24 frames per second already embedded within it. The reason you want to use 24 frames per second gives you that most cinematic look. That's typically what Hollywood movies and films and documentaries are shot in 24 frames and edited in 24 to give it more of that filmic cinematic look. So you're going to click it. You can name it whatever you want. We're just going to name this slow motion, can't spell today, tutorial. Click OK, and we are good to go for the rest of it. So now you have your timeline ready. We're gonna bring some footage in. So we're gonna click this first clip of basketball practice, our men's basketball team here at Ryerson. scrub through it and find something we want to slow down. And there was a dunk. So we're going to take this clip here of Tom hit our in point, play through, and let's just cut it there. And then we're going to drag our footage into our timeline. Now, when you edit high frame rate footage or any different frame rate from what your sequence is, this is going to pop up. This is essentially saying, hey, your clip isn't the same settings as your sequence. In this case, we're shooting at 120 frames and we're dropping it in a 24 frames per second timeline. So in this case, we do want to edit in a 24 frames per second timeline. So we're going to keep click existing settings. That's going to happen every time. Just make sure you keep the settings of your timeline. I'm going to zoom in here to the footage, and now we have our clip here in our timeline. So now that we have our clip, I'm going to show you the first of two ways that I like to slow down my footage when I have it in my timeline. So this is using the speed and duration tools within Premiere Pro. So what you want to do is right click your clip on your timeline, and you're going to see here speed and duration. I'm going to click that, and this little window is going to pop up. This is essentially where you can control the speed or the duration, if you so desire, of your clip. This also allows you to reverse the speed, which is effectively puts your clip in a reverse, ripple edit, a bunch of little different things, but that's not what we're here for. So there's a rule when it comes to slowing down footage. Depending on the amount of frames that you're using, there's only a certain limit as to what your clip can be slowed down to. 120 frames can be slowed down to 20% of its regular speed. 60 frames per second can be slowed down to 40. So if we go here and type in 20 and hit OK, you're going to notice the clip extended a lot. The audio didn't because we didn't select it, but you can also edit the audio if you want. We're just going to delete it here for now. I'm just going to focus on the visuals. Pull up the timeline so you can see a little more, and you're going to click here and you're going to notice already, bang, buttery smooth slow motion, Tom's dunk in all its glory, him going up and slamming it down. Easy, super easy way to slow down your footage. And if you really, if you don't want it to be slowed down to 20%, go back to speed and duration. You want it 50% of the speed. Still pretty slow. It depends on your edit. It depends on what you're trying to do, but you can really get creative. Sometimes, some people don't like 120 frames per second footage at 100%. Some people think it's a little jittery. Sometimes if I like a clip and I don't want it to be too jittery or too shaking, I'll hit 80% of its original speed. It's not too slow. It just kind of depends on what your project is and what you're working on. But for the most part, really easy way. Once again, right click, speed and duration, whatever percentage you want to go with. If you're shooting 120, you're going to hit 20% of the speed and bang, some buttery smooth slow motion footage, just like you see on everybody's highlight reels or mixtape nowadays. We're going to move on now to the second way of editing slow motion footage, and this is my go-to for a lot of reasons. I do use the speed and duration. Usually if I don't really care about slowing down a particular part of the clip and I just want the whole clip slowed down. The second form you can get a lot more precise with, and that is speed ramping. So for our second technique, speed ramping, we're going to switch it up. We're going to go with a volleyball clip this time. PSA, if you guys haven't shot or edited volleyball before, highly recommend. Really fun to shoot, really fun sport to edit, especially in slow motion. Getting those slow motion digs or spikes or blocks it's just graceful and looks really epic and cool, and you can do a lot with it. But enough of that. We're going to go here and we're going to drag our clip down. I've already selected a part which I liked. And this time, instead of clicking on your clip speed and duration, we are going to go to show clip keyframes at the bottom, time remapping, and under that is speed. You click on that and you notice the bar here changes from the opaqueness to a percentage. This originally would edit the opaqueness transparency of your clip. Now it's editing the speed. So if I bring this down to 20%, the clip extends and it's all in slow motion. So it essentially does what speed and duration does, but on a method where you can actually see and scale it. But the cool thing is you can actually keyframe this as well. So we're going to click undo. So let's say you want most of your clip to be sped up, but you want to slow down at one particular moment. So if you go to your bar here, your toolbar, hit the pen tool, or you can hit P on your keyboard for shortcuts. Click where you want to slow down. So I want to slow it down right as she hits the ball, right before. And you're going to notice a marker, a keyframe marker goes there. Then it actually splits the clip in half, so you can really actually just drag the second half here. So we're going to go down to 20%, and we're going to play the clip through, and you're going to notice as soon as the playhead hits the marker, the footage automatically will slow down to 20%, right in slow motion. So that's the beauty about using something like speed ramping. You can really control when and where your footage will slow down and how much it'll slow down. And it gets even more in depth to how much more customizable and how much more you can play around and get creative with this kind of editing style with slow motion footage. So another thing you can do is if you zoom in a little bit, you're gonna notice you can actually drag the playhead apart and create a slope. So now when you click your footage, it slows down over time. It's not just a direct slow down, it's gonna slow down over time. So you can even extend that further. And there it slows down after. So what you can do as well, you can drag the playhead. So now I want it to slow down as she's jumping up into the air. So as she's jumping up, it slows down. Drag it back a little more to show you what I was meant to do. So it slows down as she's running, and then it fully slows down as she goes up into the air and hits the ball. If you want to get more creative here, let's have it speed up as soon as she hits the ball. So she hits the ball right there. We're gonna hit P. You can build another one, another keyframe pop-up, drag it up to 100% or however fast. You can go even faster if you want. And then we're gonna extend it just so it's not as jarring. Play the clip again. It starts to slow down. She goes up for the ball. And as soon as she hits it, it's gonna speed right back up to 100%. So between these two techniques for slowing down and editing your footage, I'm gonna say I use speed ramping around 90% of the time. Why? I just like the flexibility it gives me. I like how creative you can be by selecting certain points and slowing it down whenever you want. I really think it gives you the most creative control possible when it comes to editing your high frame rate footage. At the end of the day though, I think the way you manipulate and use your slow motion footage is totally up to your creative level and your creative vision and what you want your final product to look like. I think being able to shoot and edit slow motion footage properly is one of the most important things a sport content creator can do, because it just increases the level of creativity and the different things you can do within the footage in your videos to make them that more creative and eye-catching. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you guys so much for sitting down and watching. I hope you guys learned something. And once again, if you guys could like, subscribe, leave me a comment down below. It would really help me grow. Follow me on Instagram at 77jmorales. I would love to get in touch with you guys. I would love to start a conversation. Let me know how you guys are using slow motion footage. Let me know if you guys have any questions. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.